I'm Carol. It was a tense evening when the police arrested Jake outside Daniel's apartment. He was screaming, "This is what you wanted. You're destroying me." I stood there, silent, with Daniel by my side, shaken but steady. It was a far cry from the peaceful life I'd been building with Daniel, and it all started months ago. I met Jake 3 years back. He came from a well-off family. His father was a strict businessman who believed in tough love, and his mother was overly protective, always making excuses for his behavior. We moved in together a year and a half into our relationship. We split groceries, rent, and our daily routines so smoothly that I thought we had passed the rocky stage. Looking back, there were so many red flags that I chose to ignore. If I didn't reply to his texts within an hour, he'd spiral into anxious silence. He'd follow it up with seemingly concerned questions like, "Are you okay? Did I do something wrong? Why didn't you answer?" At first, I thought it was just his way of showing attachment, then I thought it was love. But in reality, it was control. Jealousy soon crept into our relationship. He'd make sharp comments about my male co-workers and question why I needed to have coffee with friends he didn't know. His jokes were often off-key and lingered in an uncomfortable way. But I stayed because, on the surface, our relationship was mostly good. One Tuesday in March, everything changed. He was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone as if it had delivered a life-altering verdict. He looked well-groomed, like he'd prepared for this moment. "I think we need some time apart," he said without looking up. I was stunned. "Time apart? A break?" I asked. He nodded quickly and said, "I just need space to sort things out. It's not you, it's me." A week earlier, he'd casually mentioned that his ex-girlfriend, Lily, had moved back to town. "She got a job here," he said, shrugging as if it was no big deal. I waited for him to reassure me, to explain, but nothing came. I felt a strange calmness settle inside me, maybe out of exhaustion or instinct. "Okay," I said. He looked up, as if he'd misheard me. "You want space?" "I'll give you space," I said evenly. He stared at me as if I'd failed a test he expected me to beg my way through. The next week, he moved out, but not officially. Half of his things remained because he claimed it was just a temporary break, a reset. But reality hit hard. Both our names were on the lease, with 8 months remaining. The landlord didn't care who left, he just wanted the rent paid. I paid the first month alone to protect my credit. When I contacted the landlord, he was blunt. "Unless you both sign a termination agreement and pay the penalty, you're both responsible." End of story. So, I sent Jake a certified letter, highlighting his 50% obligation. 2 weeks later, his social media told the truth. There was a photo of him and Lily at our favorite cafe, with the caption, "Sometimes fate brings people back together." I didn't cry, I screenshotted it for records. I realized then that this wasn't a break, it was an exit he wanted me to support. I paid the full rent again the second month, not because it was fair, but because eviction notices don't care about fairness. I texted Jake, reminding him of his rent obligation and the need to sign the termination agreement. His reply, "Can this wait? I'm swamped right now," made me realize he was hoping I'd absorb the inconvenience as I always had. I stopped treating it like a breakup and started treating it like a contract dispute. I saved every text, missed call, and photo he posted with Lily. After 2 months of non-payment, I sent a formal demand letter to his parents' address. When he finally called, he was angry, accusing me of being heartless. I calmly reminded him that he left and that leaving came with obligations. He showed up the next day, trying to pull me into an emotional argument, but I refused. He signed the termination agreement, not because he understood, but because he faced the consequences. After he was legally off the lease, I had to deal with his remaining things. State law stated that items left over 30 days after a tenant vacates are considered abandoned. I boxed his things carefully and donated them to a local women's shelter. I sent him a copy of the receipt with a note saying his items were helping women in need. Lily then texted me, saying I had serious issues. I simply replied that I was following the law. By June, my life started to expand. I met Daniel, a man with quiet confidence. He didn't demand my time, monitor my replies, or treat affection as a transaction. For the first time in a long time, being with someone felt peaceful. But Jake wasn't ready to let go. In July, he messaged me, saying he'd been thinking about us and that he'd messed up. I told him I was with someone new and wished him well. 20 minutes later, he was pounding on my door at 10 p.m. He looked a mess, with red eyes and a tight jaw. He couldn't believe I'd moved on. I calmly reminded him that he'd left, and moving in with his ex-girlfriend was a breakup. His grief turned ugly. He accused me of ruining his life, called me petty, and said donating his things was malicious. I pulled out my phone and said I was calling the non-emergency line. He kicked the door and threatened me as he backed away. The next morning, I woke up to 47 texts filled with apologies, accusations, threats, and declarations of love. I archived them without responding. He then started showing up at my gym and the coffee shop near my office. It always seemed accidental but felt intentional. The final straw was when he called my workplace, telling my supervisor he was concerned about my mental health. My boss called me in, but I showed him all the evidence, texts, police reports, and lease documentation. He realized it was harassment. That afternoon, I hired a lawyer. She drafted a cease and desist letter and sent it to his parents' address. His father called, angry and defensive, saying Jake just wanted closure. I told him Jake was harassing me. After that, direct contact stopped, but vague social media posts appeared, hinting at emotional abuse and victimhood. 2 weeks later, Jake went after Daniel. An anonymous email was sent to Daniel's workplace, claiming I was abusive. HR had to investigate. Daniel was furious. That's when we decided to go to the police station. The detective said it was textbook stalking and filed for an emergency protective order. The night the order was to be served, Daniel called and whispered that Jake was outside, sitting in his car. I told him to call 911, and when I arrived, the police were already there. Jake claimed he was lost, but the officers arrested him on the spot. The next day, I got a call from Lily's ex, warning me to drop the case. I saved the call and reported it. At the hearing, Jake's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, but my lawyer presented a timeline of events, messages, and reports. The judge granted a 2-year protective order. 3 months later, my lawyer called, saying Jake wanted a mediated meeting and was offering a 5-year protective order extension. He also claimed to have information about Lily's ex, a criminal investigation, and that I was listed as a secondary victim. Daniel thought it was a trap, but I decided to go for the 5-year silence. At the meeting, Jake looked different, calmer. He'd been in therapy for 3 months. He told me the truth. Lily's ex had blackmailed her with old private photos, forcing her to leave me and go back to him. When he dumped her, she spiraled. He signed the 5-year extension. 2 months later, Lily's ex was arrested in another state. Apology letters arrived from Lily. Daniel and I moved in together, starting a new, calm life. One afternoon, I ran into Jake's mother at the store. She said what happened was for the best, and I hoped Jake would heal. I've learned that red flags are warnings, not flaws. Jealousy is instability, not devotion. A break without clarity is an exit without accountability. Documenting everything is for safety, not revenge. Mental illness may explain behavior but doesn't excuse harm. Someone can be both a victim and a perpetrator. Closure is about distance, time, and peace. And now, Daniel and I are building a life free from chaos and fear.